This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. And what I'm looking at today is 2023's The Fearway, directed by Robert Gajic. And when I first saw the trailer for this movie, it bugged me. I liked what I saw for the most part, though there was an aspect of it giving away the antagonist that concerned me a little bit, because if it's doing that in a trailer, one of two things is possible. Either it has a heck of a lot more story to tell, and giving us that little morsel was a minor thing, or it literally shot its wad, and there was not much else beyond that. And unfortunately, in the case of The Fearway, it's more of the latter than the former. If you haven't seen the movie, and it's currently on Tubi, and it is worth seeing, it revolves around a couple who are pursued on a trip by this thing, this entity, in a black Dodge Challenger. And they stop eventually at a diner where they meet other people who don't seem capable of leaving the diner. And they want to leave as well, but that black car is omnipresent and seems to be almost haunting them. As I mentioned in my opening, this movie is fairly obvious, and that's the pity, because it essentially is a cross between 1977's The Car and 2003's Identity, but with none of the mystery of those two movies. And this movie needed mystery to work. It's fairly obvious what's happening. And in fact, if you don't understand what's happening with this movie in about 20 minutes to a half hour of watching it, you probably weren't paying that much attention. And that's a pity, because it's very Twilight Zone-esque, which is fine. But the thing about the Twilight Zone that made it work is that it wasn't obvious. Whatever would be happening, whatever the episode, it didn't tend to be obvious right off the bat. You had to wade in a little. It delayed gratification. And so when you actually came upon what was really happening, it was pretty damn impressive most of the time. The Fearway could have used some of that delayed gratification. If it had changed some things about it, I think it would have been a significantly better movie. For instance, the antagonist was just so overtly sinister. Now keep in mind, it is driving a black Dodge Challenger, quite possibly one of the most sinister looking cars available today. You didn't even need to have someone so overtly wicked looking driving it. In fact, I would argue it should have been a more innocent looking person. For instance, if you've seen Burnt Offerings or Michael Winner's The Sentinel, what those two movies hold in common, besides being very supernatural orientated, is that they both co-star Burgess Meredith. You know, the guy who played the Penguin on the 1966 Batman series? He is probably the most unsinister, unassuming looking man ever. But when he plays evil, it is devastatingly creepy. There's just something about his nature. It's as if Mr. Rogers were evil. It would be really weird. And the same thing goes for Burgess Meredith. You would not suspect him of being evil, but the way he puts a certain emphasis on words, the way he glances, is really just unnerving. This movie needed that. This movie needed to hold its cards back a little and stop giving away things that it didn't need to give away. And as I said, I don't mean to imply for a moment that it's unwatchable or even bad, because it's not. It's just not subtle enough. It hits us over the head with certain themes and ideas. when it doesn't need to do that. If it would just, once again, hold back. Don't tell us why it's happening. Don't show us some overtly sinister person in a Dodge Challenger. That would have worked better for the movie. And another thing, and it's not a mistake, in fact, it makes sense in the context of the movie. It kind of bothered me that the people driving the Kia Soul couldn't quite pick up on the fact that the car chasing them has multiples more horsepower than they do. And if his goal was to catch up to them, he literally could have done it at any point. That being said, maybe they weren't car people. I mean, it's not a mistake. As I said, his goal was to herd them to a place. But it just kind of bugged me. On the whole, the Fearway is watchable, though it bothers me that the movie is not as good as it could have been. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace.